The scent of expensive cologne, something woody and assured, still hung in the air of the Harrison Tech boardroom. It was the kind of fragrance that screamed old money and unshakable confidence, the kind Jake had always tried to emulate. Ironic, really. I inhaled deeply, the aroma mixing with the faint, almost undetectable smell of new carpet and polished mahogany. My own scent, a subtle vanilla I'd worn for years, felt like a quiet rebellion in this space. I pressed the nib of the ridiculously fancy fountain pen to the last page of the contract. The paper was thick, creamy, each word meticulously printed, binding me to a future I'd only dared to dream of in fragmented late night moments. Maya Chen, Chief Executive Officer, Harrison Tech. The letters blurred for a second, and I blinked, attributing it to the ridiculously early start. It wasn't the early start, it was the weight of the moment, the sheer, almost gravitational pull of what this signature meant. This was Harrison Tech. His Harrison Tech. The company Jake had mooned over, the one whose stock prices he'd tracked more diligently than our anniversary. The company he'd once said, with that charming, patronizing smile of his, was out of my league, babe, but it's cute you're interested. Again, he'd underestimated me. He'd always underestimated me. It was his blind spot, the fatal flaw in his otherwise meticulously crafted life plan. The irony, oh, it tasted sweeter than the ridiculously overpriced champagne they'd served at the press announcement earlier. A crisp, bubbly sort of vindication. 5 years. 5 years ago, he'd stood in our tiny, rain-streaked apartment, his jaw tight, his eyes avoiding mine, and uttered the words that had simultaneously shattered and galvanized me. Your literature degree, Maya, it's worthless in the real world. He'd said it with a kind of pained sincerity, as if delivering a harsh but necessary truth for my own good. He was packing his bags then, wasn't he? Trading our cozy, book-filled life for a future with Sarah and her gleaming, impressive MBA. He'd chosen ambition, or what he perceived as such, over me. Now my hand trembled just a fraction as I slid the signed contract across the polished expanse of the table towards Mr. Henderson, the chairman. He smiled, a genuine warm smile that reached his eyes. Welcome aboard, Miss Chen. We're all incredibly excited to see what you bring to Harrison Tech. I managed a polite, composed smile of my own, the kind I'd perfected over years of boardroom presentations and investor meetings. Thank you, Mr. Henderson. I'm eager to get started. The board members, a collection of sharp suits and even sharper minds, began to file out, their murmurs of congratulations and hushed, expectant tones echoing off the marble walls. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows that wrapped around the 30th floor boardroom, the city sprawled below, a glittering, indifferent beast. My eyes found a familiar landmark, a squat, brick apartment building nestled between two glass and steel behemoths. Jake's old building, our old building. He was probably down there now, in his own office, blissfully unaware. Soon he'd get the memo, the company-wide email. He'd discover that his worthless ex, the girl he'd deemed too impractical for his grand ambitions, was reborn. Reborn as his new boss. The thought sent a shiver, not of cold, but of something akin to exhilaration down my spine. He doesn't know, not yet, but he will. The rain had been relentless that day 5 years ago. It wasn't a gentle spring shower, it was an insistent, angry downpour, each drop hammering against the window pane of our small apartment like a tiny fist. The sound of it, that incessant drumming, became the soundtrack to the unraveling of my world. It's funny, the sensory details that stick with you, branding themselves onto your memory. I can still hear that rain, feel the damp chill that had seeped into the room, a chill that had nothing to do with the weather. Jake stood by the window, his silhouette stark against the gray, weeping sky. He'd been quiet for an hour, a heavy, loaded silence that had coiled in my stomach like a snake. I'd tried to break it, offering tea, asking about his day, my voice sounding unnaturally bright even to my own ears. He'd just shaken his head, his gaze fixed on something distant, something I clearly wasn't a part of. Finally, he turned, and his face was a mask of strained composure. Maya, we need to talk. The cliché of it, the sheer unadulterated banality of the phrase, made me want to laugh or maybe scream. Okay, I'd said, my voice small. I remember clutching a well worn copy of 100 Years of Solitude to my chest, as if Garcia Marquez himself could offer some magical realism to deflect what was coming. This isn't working, he'd continued, the words clipped, precise. He'd always been precise. It was one of the things I'd initially admired about him. His precision in arguments, in planning, in dismantling a relationship. I've been doing a lot of thinking about the future, my future. My future, not our future. The distinction was a subtle, brutal blow. And? I'd prompted, my throat tight. He sighed, running a hand through his perfectly styled hair. And I don't see how we fit, long term. He gestured vaguely around our living room, at the overflowing bookshelves, the stacks of literary journals, the comfortable, slightly worn armchair where I spent hours reading. It was a room that screamed us, or so I'd thought. Now his gesture seemed to dismiss it all as clutter, as an impediment. What are you saying, Jake? I'm saying. He'd paused. Then the words came out in a rush. I'm saying that your degree, Maya, your literature degree, it's wonderful. You're brilliant with it, but it's worthless in the real world, the world I'm aiming for. Worthless. The word hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. My passion, my sanctuary, the lens through which I understood the complexities of human nature, reduced to a single, dismissive adjective. And Sarah? I'd asked, the name tasting like ash in my mouth. Sarah, with her crisp MBA from Stanford, her network of important people, her sleek, ambitious drive that mirrored his own. He'd been spending a lot of late nights at the office recently. Nights that I now understood had little to do with spreadsheets and presentations. He had the decency to look away then, his gaze falling to the rain-streaked window. Sarah understands the world I'm in. She's aligned with my goals. Aligned like a business merger. The devastation was a physical thing, a crushing weight on my chest that made it hard to breathe. I felt the familiar sting of tears, the prelude to a storm of grief and anger I knew would consume me. But then, something shifted. As I looked at him, at his carefully constructed apology, his averted gaze, a different emotion flickered to life amidst the wreckage. A cold, clear spark of something. Determination? No, it was more than that. It was a sudden, sharp understanding. He was right in a twisted way. The Maya he knew, the Maya who patiently listened to his rants about office politics, who proofread his reports, who put her own quiet ambitions on hold to support his loud ones, that Maya probably wouldn't fit into his gleaming, ruthless future. So, I didn't beg, I didn't plead. I didn't list all the ways a deep understanding of narrative and human psychology, the very essence of my worthless degree, was, in fact, a superpower in any world, even his. Instead, I took a slow, deliberate breath, the scent of rain and his betrayal filling my lungs, and I liberated myself. You're right, Jake, I'd said, my voice surprisingly steady. We don't fit. He looked up then, a flicker of surprise in his eyes. He'd expected tears, arguments, a messy, emotional scene. My quiet agreement seemed to unmoor him. So that's it? He'd asked, a strange note of disappointment in his voice. That's it. I'd walked to the door, grabbing my worn trench coat. The rain was still hammering down. Good luck with your future, Jake. As I walked away from him, from our shared life, from the shards of my broken heart, a smile touched my lips. It wasn't a happy smile. Not then. It was a mysterious, almost feral little thing. A smile that promised I wouldn't just survive this, I would rewrite the entire goddamn narrative. He had no idea who he'd just set free. He had no idea of the story that was about to unfold. A story he wouldn't even realize he was a character in until the final shocking chapter. And the rain, it just kept falling, washing away the old, making way for something new, something unexpected. What Jake never knew, what no one knew back then, was that my worthless literature degree wasn't just about escaping into fictional worlds. It was about understanding them, deconstructing them, learning how to build them. And during the last 2 years of our relationship, while he was meticulously charting his ascent up the corporate ladder, I'd been quietly, obsessively building a world of my own. It wasn't a world of words on a page, but of algorithms and code, a secret project I'd poured my nights and weekends into. My secret was an AI platform. While Jake was networking at sterile corporate events, I was teaching myself Python, C++, immersing myself in the language of machines. It sounds like a contradiction, doesn't it? The literature graduate lost in lines of code. But to me, it was the most natural extension of my studies. My degree had armed me with an intricate understanding of narrative structure, character motivation, the subtle nuances of human psychology that make stories compelling. I saw patterns in stories, in the way people communicate, in the emotional arcs that resonate universally. And I realized, with a jolt that was both terrifying and exhilarating, that these patterns could be translated into data. That AI could learn to understand and even generate narratives, not just cold robotic text, but content with emotional depth, with a human touch. The smell of coffee, strong and slightly burnt, became the perfume of those clandestine years. Our tiny apartment kitchen, bathed in the pre-dawn glow of my laptop screen, was my laboratory. Late-night coding sessions, fueled by endless cups of coffee and a burgeoning sense of purpose, became my ritual. Jake would be asleep, his breathing a steady rhythm in the quiet dark, oblivious to the digital world taking shape just a few feet away. He saw me with a book, always with a book, and assumed that was the extent of my ambition. He never once asked what was on my screen, what furrowed my brow in concentration at 3 in the morning. The initial months after the breakup were a blur of grief and coding. The panic of starting over, of being truly alone with this audacious, possibly insane idea, was a constant companion. My tiny savings dwindled at an alarming rate. There were days I lived on instant noodles and sheer willpower, the hollowness in my stomach a dull ache that mirrored the one in my heart. But then, there was the exhilaration, the thrill of a line of code finally working, of the AI generating a sentence, then a paragraph, then a short story that was surprisingly good. It was like watching a child take its first steps. Finding Marcus was a stroke of serendipity, or maybe the universe finally cutting me some slack. I'd posted a tentative query on an obscure online forum for programmers, looking for someone with more technical expertise than I possessed. Marcus Wong, a brilliant, slightly eccentric programmer with a disdain for the corporate grind and a shared passion for disruptive ideas, responded. He had a way of looking at code that was almost poetic. He saw the elegance in algorithms, the narrative in data structures. We met in a noisy, crowded coffee shop. More coffee, always more coffee. And I laid out my vision, my voice trembling slightly, half expecting him to laugh. He didn't laugh. He listened, his dark eyes intense, and when I finished, he just nodded slowly. "It's crazy," he said, a grin spreading across his face. "It's completely, wonderfully crazy. I'm in." Together, we refined the platform. He built the robust backend, the elegant architecture, while I focused on the AI's literary mind, feeding it terabytes of text, from Shakespeare to contemporary thrillers, teaching it the art of storytelling. There were setbacks, bugs that seemed insurmountable, moments of despair when we both wanted to throw our laptops out the window. But the belief in what we were creating, this shared secret obsession, kept us going. And then, the quiet power move, the one that would lay the foundation for everything to come. Before we even had a name for our nascent company, before we'd secured a single dollar of funding, I drained the last of my emergency fund, the money my grandmother had left me, the money I'd sworn never to touch. And I patented our core technology. The specific algorithms, the unique way our AI learned and generated narrative, it felt like a gamble, a reckless, desperate throw of the dice. But my gut, that intuition honed by years of reading between the lines of human motivation, told me it was crucial. For months, nothing. Just more coding, more coffee, more ramen. Then, one crisp autumn afternoon, the phone rang. An unfamiliar number with a Silicon Valley area code. I almost didn't answer. "Is this Maya Chen?" a brisk professional voice inquired. "Yes. This is Amelia Davies from Novatech Entertainment. We've been hearing some interesting whispers about an AI platform you've developed, something that understands narrative. we'd be very interested in a demonstration. Nova Tech, one of the biggest players in digital content, a behemoth in the entertainment industry. My hand tightened on the phone, my heart hammering against my ribs. A demonstration. They wanted a demonstration. The first tendril of a possible future, a future Jake couldn't even conceive of for me, was reaching out. The exhilaration was so potent, it almost made me forget the lingering taste of coffee and the dull ache of a heart still trying to mend. Almost. The call from Novatech was the first crack of light in a long, dark tunnel. Our demonstration, conducted via a slightly shaky video call from Marcus's cluttered living room, left them stunned. Our AI, which we'd finally christened Narrative AI, didn't just churn out grammatically correct sentences. It wove intricate plots, developed believable characters, even adapted its tone and style based on nuanced prompts. It was, as Amelia Davies put it, like nothing we've ever seen. That first contract, a pilot program with Novatech, felt impossibly heavy in my hands. The texture of the thick, embossed paper, the crispness of the print, the sheer number of zeros after the initial figure. It was tangible proof that my worthless's degree, filtered through the logic of code and the ambition of a woman scorned, had actual, measurable value. Marcus and I celebrated with pizza and cheap champagne, the bubbles tickling my nose, the taste of precursor to sweeter victories. Narrative AI grew, not with a bang, but with a steady, powerful hum. We weren't interested in flashy headlines or overhyped launch parties. We focused on the product, on refining the AI, on making it smarter, more intuitive, more human. Our client base expanded, first within the entertainment industry, movie studios, using it to brainstorm scripts, gaming companies to generate dynamic in-game narratives, novelists to break through writer's block. Then, it bled into marketing, into advertising, into any field that relied on compelling storytelling to connect with an audience. We were the quiet disruptors, the secret weapon whispered about in creative circles. I learned to navigate the world of business, a world I'd once viewed with a mixture of trepidation and disdain. I discovered that my literature background wasn't a hindrance, but an advantage. Understanding character archetypes helped me read a boardroom. Analyzing plot structures helped me craft a business strategy. The ability to empathize, to understand unspoken motivations, skills honed by dissecting complex literary characters, made me a surprisingly effective negotiator. I wasn't playing their game, I was subtly rewriting the rules. It was during a late-night trawl through industry news, a habit I'd developed to keep an eye on potential competitors and collaborators, that I saw his name, Jake Morrison. A small headline, a corporate photo. Him looking a little older, a little more polished, if that were possible. Jake Morrison appointed VP of Strategy at Harrison Tech. Harrison Tech, his dream company, the one he'd always aspired to, the pinnacle of his ambitions. A strange cocktail of emotions churned within me, a distant echo of pain, a surprising pang of something that felt dangerously like satisfaction. He'd gotten what he wanted, or so he thought. Further down the article, another familiar name, Sarah Williams. The article mentioned she was now head of marketing at a rival tech firm, and then a small, almost throwaway line. Mr. Morrison and Miss Williams, who have been a couple for several years, recently announced their engagement. Engaged. Of course. It was the logical next step in their perfectly aligned power couple narrative. I closed the laptop, the faint glow of the screen reflecting in my eyes. It didn't hurt as much as I thought it would. Or maybe the hurt was now overshadowed by a different, more potent feeling. A sense of inevitability, of pieces clicking into place on a chessboard only I could see. One of the most crucial quiet power moves I made during Narrative AI's ascent was deliberate invisibility. While other tech startups clamored for media attention, for features in glossy magazines and breathless profiles on tech blogs, I kept us out of the spotlight. Our success was significant, undeniable within the industries we served, but we maintained a low public profile. No 30 under 30 lists for Maya Chen. No splashy interviews about the female founder disrupting a male-dominated field. It wasn't humility, it was strategy. I didn't want Jake or Sarah or the wider world to see me coming. I wanted narrative AI to be a force, a recognized power, but I, Maya Chen, wanted to remain an enigma. Let them underestimate me. Let them believe I was still that quiet, bookish girl with the worthless degree. It would make the final act all the more impactful. The call came on a Tuesday morning. I was in our modest but functional office, the comforting hum of servers a backdrop to the click-clack of keyboards. My assistant, a bright young woman named Chloe, poked her head around the door. Maya, Dr. Elena Harrison's office on the line for you. She says it's urgent. Elena Harrison, the daughter of the legendary founder of Harrison Tech, the current and, by all accounts, formidable CEO. My breath hitched. I'd known, on some subterranean level, that our paths would eventually converge. Harrison Tech, with its vast media holdings and its recent, slightly clumsy forays into AI, was a natural fit for narrative AI's capabilities. But the CEO herself? Put her through, Chloe, I said, my voice calmer than I felt. The line clicked, and a warm, authoritative voice filled my ear. Miss Chen. Elena Harrison. I've been hearing a great deal about narrative AI. Impressive things. I believe it's time we talked. Perhaps about a potential acquisition? Acquisition. The word resonated through me, a seismic shock. This wasn't just a partnership, a collaboration. This was the end game. Or perhaps a new beginning. My gaze drifted to the window, to the distant, glittering towers of the financial district where Harrison Tech undoubtedly resided. The game was afoot, and Jake Morrison had no idea he was about to become a pawn in a play I'd been scripting for 5 long years. The Harrison Tech headquarters were exactly as I'd imagined, and precisely as Jake had described them countless times, a cathedral of corporate power. Gleaming marble floors reflected the cool, recessed lighting, the air hummed with a quiet, expensive efficiency, and the artwork on the walls probably cost more than narrative AI's entire seed funding round. As I walked towards the executive wing, the crisp sound of my heels on the marble was the only punctuation in the otherwise hushed reverence of the space. It was a sound that announced my arrival, steady and confident, a counterpoint to the tremor of anticipation in my chest. Dr. Elena Harrison's office was at the corner, a vast expanse of glass and muted tones, offering a panoramic view of the city that was both breathtaking and intimidating. She rose to greet me, a woman in her mid-60s with a mane of silver hair, intelligent eyes that missed nothing, and an aura of effortless authority. She was Harrison Tech royalty, the founder's daughter, and she carried that legacy not as a burden, but as a well-tailored suit. Miss Chen, Maya, please come in. Her handshake was firm, her smile genuine. Coffee? Tea? Coffee would be lovely, thank you, Dr. Harrison. As we settled into plush leather chairs, a silent assistant materializing with a tray, Elena got straight to the point. I won't waste your time with pleasantries, Maya. I'm stepping down as CEO of Harrison Tech at the end of this quarter. I blinked, surprised by her directness. The industry rumors had been swirling, of course, but this was the first direct confirmation. That's significant news, Dr. Harrison. She chuckled, a warm, throaty sound. Significant, yes. And it leaves a rather large pair of shoes to fill. Her gaze was sharp, appraising. I've been watching narrative AI for months. More than months, if I'm honest. What you've built, Maya, the way you've harnessed the soul of storytelling, for want of a better word, and integrated it with technology, it's revolutionary. Harrison Tech needs that. We're a content company, at our core. And you, my dear, understand content on a level most tech people can't even fathom. My heart began to beat a little faster. This wasn't just about acquiring narrative AI, this was something bigger. You're not just interested in my company, are you? I asked, keeping my tone even. Elena smiled, a slow, knowing smile. No, I'm interested in you. Harrison Tech needs a visionary. Someone who can see not just the next quarter, but the next decade. Someone who understands that creativity and technology are not opposing forces, but two sides of the same coin. She leaned forward, her voice dropping slightly. I've interviewed countless candidates, Maya. Men and women with impeccable MBAs, with decades of experience in so-called traditional tech. They talk about synergy, about disruption, about shareholder value. She waved a dismissive hand. You talk about narrative, about human connection. That's what's been missing here. The realization hit me then, a wave of understanding so profound it almost took my breath away. This wasn't just an acquisition. This was an anointing. This was the ultimate vindication. A victory so complete, so perfectly orchestrated by a fate I hadn't even known was on my side, that it felt like a scene from one of the novels I so loved. The girl with the worthless literature degree offered the crown jewel of the corporate world, the very kingdom her ex-fiancé worshipped from afar. A quiet power move, subtle but deeply satisfying. I didn't reveal my connection to Jake. I didn't mention that I knew exactly who her VP of strategy was, that our lives had once been intimately, painfully intertwined. Let that discovery come later. Let the full impact of this decision unfold in its own dramatic time. My silence in that moment was a strategic choice, a way of keeping my own narrative pristine, untainted by the messy emotions of the past. Dr. Harrison, I began, choosing my words carefully. Elena, please. Elena, I corrected myself, a small smile playing on my lips. What exactly are you proposing? Her eyes twinkled. I'm proposing, Maya, that Harrison Tech acquire Narrative AI. And as part of that acquisition, I'm offering you the position of Chief Executive Officer of Harrison Tech. The words hung in the air, monumental, game-changing. CEO of Harrison Tech. The room, with its panoramic view and its expensive art, suddenly felt like a stage, and the final act of a long, intricate play was about to begin. And Jake Morrison, bless his ambitious, unsuspecting heart, had no idea he was about to get a front-row seat to the most shocking plot twist of his life. The offer lay on the table, gleaming with promise and fraught with peril. CEO of Harrison Tech. It was the kind of opportunity that changes not just a career, but a life. I should have felt pure, unadulterated triumph, and a part of me did. A fierce, vindicated part that wanted to shout, yes, 1,000 times yes. But another part, a quieter, more hesitant voice, urged caution. I spent the next few days in a daze, the weight of Elena's offer pressing down on me. I walked for hours through the city, the autumn leaves crunching underfoot, trying to untangle the knot of emotions in my chest. Was this what I truly wanted? Or was it just about Jake? About proving him wrong, about finally, definitively winning? Flashbacks, unbidden and unwelcome, ambushed me at odd moments. The way Jake's eyes would light up when he talked about Harrison Tech, the reverence in his voice, the casual dismissal in his tone when he spoke of my aspirations, as if they were charming but ultimately insignificant hobbies. The metallic taste of old hurt, sharp and coppery on my tongue, mixed with the new, intoxicating possibility of this role. It was a confusing, unsettling cocktail. I remembered one particularly painful evening, a few months before the breakup. I'd just received a small local award for a short story I'd written. It wasn't much, $100 and a certificate, but it had meant the world to me. I'd rushed home, eager to share the news. Jake had been on a conference call, pacing the small living room, his voice sharp and authoritative as he debated quarterly projections with colleagues I'd never met. When he finally hung up, I'd shown him the certificate, my face flushed with pride. He'd glanced at it, a cursory, dismissive look. Oh, that's nice, Maya. Creative writing, huh? He'd then immediately launched into a detailed account of his own triumph that day, some minor victory in a departmental power struggle that had in his eyes been a strategic masterpiece. My small achievement, my little spark of joy, had been extinguished by his casual indifference. The memory still stung, a tiny, persistent thorn in my side. Taking the CEO role at his dream company, it would be more than just a career move. It would be rewriting that painful memory, replacing his indifference with, well, with what? Shock? Regret? Marcus, ever the pragmatist, was unequivocal. We were in our small, cluttered office, the scent of lukewarm coffee and stressed-out servers hanging in the air. I'd laid out Elena's offer, my voice carefully neutral. He'd leaned back in his battered office chair, a slow grin spreading across his face. CEO of Harrison Tech? Maya, that's not just a seat at the table, that's the whole damn table. But Jake works there, Marcus. He's VP of strategy. Marcus snorted. So, let him strategize his way around that. This isn't about him, Maya. This is about you. This is about narrative AI. This is about showing the world what we've built. Is it, though? I'd murmured, more to myself than to him. Or is it about rubbing his nose in it? He'd leveled a serious gaze at me. Okay, maybe there's a little bit of that. And honestly, he bloody well deserves it. But that's not the reason to take the job. The reason to take the job is because you're the best person for it. Because Elena Harrison, who's no fool, sees that. Because narrative AI integrated into Harrison Tech could change the entire landscape of media and entertainment. His words resonated, cutting through the fog of my personal turmoil. He was right. The hunger for justice, for a reckoning, was a powerful motivator, yes. But there was more at stake here than just my personal history with Jake. This was a chance to take my vision, our vision, to a global stage. My fear of facing Jake, of the inevitable confrontation, was real. It was a cold knot in the pit of my stomach. But stronger than the fear was the desire, not just for revenge, but for something cleaner, purer, for recognition. For the chance to prove that my worthless degree, my unique way of seeing the world, was not just valuable, but transformative. I called Elena Harrison the next morning. My voice was firm, clear. Elena, I've considered your offer and I accept. Excellent! Her relief was palpable even over the phone. I knew you were the one, Maya. However, I'd continued, taking a deep breath, I have some terms. And then, the quiet power move that sealed the deal, that ensured this wasn't just a symbolic victory, but a real one. I didn't ask for an exorbitant salary or a ridiculous expense account. I negotiated for something far more valuable: complete creative control over the integration of narrative AI, a significant budget for research and development, and a seat on the board with full voting rights. I wanted to ensure that my vision wouldn't be diluted, that narrative AI wouldn't just be absorbed and assimilated by the Harrison Tech machine, but that it would be the engine driving its future. Elena agreed to every point without hesitation. Consider it done, Maya. Your vision is precisely what we're investing in. The board meeting to approve the acquisition and my appointment was scheduled for the following week. 1 week. 7 days to prepare for the biggest transition of my life. 7 days until Jake Morrison found out who was really in charge. The metallic taste of old hurt was still there, but now it was overlaid with the sweet, sharp tang of impending triumph. The mini cliffhanger of that week felt both impossibly long and terrifyingly short. That final week before the announcement felt like living in a pressure cooker. Every minute was meticulously scheduled, every action imbued with a sense underscore of monumental importance. I oscillated between moments of intense focus, where I felt like a general preparing for battle, and waves of anxiety that threatened to pull me under. The weight of my new business cards, still warm from the printer, felt symbolic in my palm: Maya Chen, CEO, Harrison Tech. It was a future I was still trying to inhabit. My days were consumed with research. I delved into Harrison Tech's current projects, its financials, its internal structures. I read every analyst report, every industry critique, every speculative article about its future. I needed to understand the beast from the inside out before I could even think about taming it, let alone leading it. Narrative AI was my baby, but Harrison Tech was a legacy, a sprawling empire with its own deeply entrenched culture, its own complex power dynamics. It was during a late-night dive into internal memos and recent board meeting minutes, discreetly provided by Elena's trusted assistant, that I found it. Jake's name, appearing again and again. He'd been pushing hard for the CEO role himself. His proposals were aggressive, focused on traditional metrics: cost-cutting, streamlining, maximizing shareholder value. Standard MBA playbook stuff, competent, certainly, but utterly devoid of the kind underscore of visionary thinking Elena was seeking. And then there was Sarah. Her fingerprints were all over Jake's bid. Networking events she'd organized, introductions she'd facilitated, subtle PR mentions that painted Jake as the natural successor. She was playing the role of the supportive fiancé, the power partner, with practiced ease. The irony wasn't lost on me. She was doing for Jake exactly what he'd once accused me of not being capable of, actively, strategically advancing his career. It was a bitter pill, but also a strangely clarifying one. They were a team, yes, but their playbook was predictable. Mine was not. The trembling in my hands as I practiced my acceptance speech in front of my bedroom mirror was a stark reminder of my lingering vulnerability. I'd delivered countless presentations, faced down skeptical investors, negotiated multi-million dollar deals. But this was different. This wasn't just business, this was deeply, irrevocably personal. The words on the page blurred. I am honored, an exciting new chapter, the future of storytelling. Cliches, empty phrases. I needed something more, something that spoke to the journey, to the quiet power of overlooked potential. Then came the quiet power move, born not of malice, but of strategic necessity. I couldn't go into that boardroom as a complete unknown, as just the founder of that AI startup. They needed to understand the force they were aligning with. Through a discreet PR contact, one who owed me a significant favor, I arranged for a couple of strategically placed articles to appear in influential tech journals in the days leading up to the announcement. Nothing too overt, just a couple of deep dive pieces on narrative AI's groundbreaking success, its revolutionary impact on the creative industries, its quietly cultivated but undeniably powerful market position. The articles wouldn't mention Harrison Tech, wouldn't hint at any upcoming acquisition. They would simply establish narrative AI and, by extension, its founder, as a serious, formidable player. Let the board members read them. Let them connect the dots. Let them understand that they weren't just hiring a new CEO, they were anointing a new queen. The night before the announcement, my apartment felt too small, the city outside too loud. I was a bundle of nerves, pacing the floor, a half-eaten container of takeout noodles abandoned on the counter. I'd reread my speech a dozen times, tweaked it, then reverted to the original. I'd laid out my outfit for the next day, a bespoke power suit in a deep sapphire blue, a silent armor. Then, my phone buzzed. An unknown number. My heart leapt into my throat. Instinctively, I knew. I answered, my voice a little breathless. Hello? A pause, then a voice that was achingly familiar, a voice I hadn't heard directly in 5 years. Maya, is that you? Jake. The sound of his voice, that familiar timbre, smooth and confident, sent a jolt through me. It was like a ghost materializing in my living room, a phantom from a past I thought I'd successfully exorcised. 5 years. It had been 5 years since I'd heard him speak directly to me, not just in remembered echoes or imagined confrontations. Jake, I said, my own voice surprisingly calm, a thin veneer over the sudden turbulence within. What a surprise. Yeah, well, it's been a while, hasn't it? He sounded different, a little hesitant, a touch of something I couldn't quite place. Nerves? Unlikely. Jake Morrison didn't do nerves. Listen, Maya, I know this is out of the blue, but I've been hearing things. Things? I echoed, sinking onto the edge of my sofa, the sapphire blue suit for tomorrow laid out on my bed, seeming to watch me. About your company. Narrative AI, right? The way he said it, as if piecing together fragments of a rumor. Word on the street is you're doing incredibly well, disrupting things, making waves. I allowed myself a small, non-committal hum. We've been fortunate. Fortunate? He chuckled, a dry, humorless sound. Maya, people are saying you're some kind of genius, that your AI is a game changer. There was a pause. Honestly, I'm not surprised. You were always brilliant, in your own way. In my own way. The old familiar condescension, wrapped in a veneer of a compliment. Some things never changed, but I wasn't the same Maya he'd left behind. The literary world's loss is tech's gain, apparently, I said, my tone light, almost playful. He seemed to seize on that. Exactly. Look, Maya, the reason I'm calling, I was thinking, we had something good once, before things got complicated. My internal struggle was a silent, vicious war. Old feelings, embers I'd thought long dead, flickered faintly. The memory of his laugh, the way he used to look at me before Sarah, before the ambition consumed everything. It was a dangerous path, that nostalgia. I ruthlessly stamped it out. This wasn't about then. This was about now and about tomorrow. He continued, sensing an opening or perhaps misinterpreting my silence. I'm in a pretty good place now, VP at Harrison Tech. It's a big deal. He said it with a casualness that was utterly transparent. He wanted me to be impressed. He needed me to be. I heard, I said. Congratulations. Thanks. And Sarah and I, we're engaged. Things are solid. That's nice for you, Jake. There was another pause, longer this time. I could almost hear the gears turning in his head. He was a strategist, after all. He was connecting dots, sensing an opportunity. A successful ex, a potentially valuable connection. He was, in his own predictable way, trying to leverage our past for his future. Then came the quiet power move, a subtle manipulation of my own. I let him think I was still the same person he left behind. I softened my voice, injected a note of wistful regret. Yeah, things did get complicated, didn't they? It's a shame how it all ended. It is, he said, his voice warming, responding to my feigned vulnerability. A real shame. Maybe we could undo some of that complication. What are you suggesting, Jake? I was thinking. We should meet for coffee, just to catch up. Talk about old times. And, new opportunities. Who knows where a conversation could lead? His tone was laden with implication. He thought he was reeling me in, the powerful executive extending a hand to his once dismissed ex, now that she'd proven herself valuable. The irony was so thick I could have bottled it. Tomorrow he would walk into Harrison Tech, confident, ambitious, ready to hear about his own glorious future. And he would find me. Not as a potential contact to be cultivated, but as the new landscape of his entire professional world. Coffee? I said, letting a smile creep into my voice. A smile he couldn't see, but could perhaps sense. That sounds interesting, Jake. Why don't you call me next week? Things are a little hectic for me right now. Next week it is, he said, a note of triumph in his voice. He thought he'd won. He thought he was in control. I look forward to it, Maya. I really do. Me too, Jake, I whispered after he'd hung up. Me too. The conversation, his predictable maneuvering, had solidified something in me. The last vestiges of doubt, of sentimentality, had vanished. Tomorrow wasn't just about business. It was about rewriting the ending of our story. And this time, I held the pen. The sheer audacity of his call, the timing of it was the universe handing me the perfect setup for the revelation to come. He had no idea, absolutely no idea. The morning of the announcement dawned crisp and clear, the kind of autumn day where the sky is an impossibly bright blue. I stood before my full-length mirror, the sapphire suit fitting like a second skin. It was more than just clothing, it was armor, a symbol of the woman I had become. The Maya who had wept over a broken heart 5 years ago was a distant memory. Today, a CEO was being born. Arriving at Harrison Tech, I felt a strange sense of calm. The nerves of the previous night had settled into a focused resolve. The elevator, all polished chrome and smoked glass, ascended with a subtle, expensive hum, carrying me towards the executive floor, towards my new reality. Each silent upward movement felt like a click in the tumblers of a lock, aligning perfectly. The executive reception area was already buzzing with a low thrum of anticipation. Board members mingled, their voices hushed. And there, standing near the window, holding court with a couple of senior executives, was Jake. He looked every inch the confident VP, impeccably dressed, a charismatic smile playing on his lips. He radiated an aura of someone who believed his moment had finally come. Beside him, a perfectly coiffed blonde woman in a Chanel suit laughed at something he said, her hand resting possessively on his arm. Sarah. Of course. She looked just as confident, her eyes scanning the room with a cool, appraising gaze, the power couple, poised for their ascension. My quiet power move was deceptively simple. Instead of avoiding them, instead of letting my gaze slide past, I walked directly towards them. My heels clicked on the marble, a sound that seemed to cut through the low murmur of conversations. Heads turned. Jake looked up, his smile faltering for a microsecond, as he registered my approach. Surprise, then a flicker of something else. Calculation crossed his face. Sarah's smile tightened, her eyes narrowing almost imperceptibly. Jake, I said, my voice warm, my smile serene. Fancy meeting you here. He recovered quickly, his professional mask snapping back into place. Maya, what are you doing here? He glanced around as if expecting me to be delivering a package. Business, I said vaguely, extending a hand. It's good to see you. He took my hand, his grip a little too firm, his eyes searching mine for something, an explanation, an angle. Sarah, ever poised, offered a cool smile. Maya, isn't it? Jake's told me so little about you. The subtle barb delivered with perfect politeness. He always was one for discretion, I replied, my own smile unwavering. The air crackled with unspoken history, with the tension of 3 lives about to collide in a way none of us could have fully anticipated. My calm, my serene smile in the face of their barely concealed surprise and suspicion was its own kind of declaration. I wasn't intimidated. I wasn't overwhelmed. I was exactly where I was supposed to be. Just then, Dr. Elena Harrison emerged from the boardroom, her presence immediately commanding the room's attention. Good morning, everyone. If you'll all join me in the boardroom, we can begin. Her eyes met mine over the heads of the others, a small, encouraging nod passing between us. Jake straightened his tie, a gesture of unconscious preparation. He shot Sarah a confident glance. This was it. Their moment. I watched them walk towards the boardroom, side by side, the picture of corporate ambition. My own heart was a steady drumbeat in my chest, a calm before the storm I was about to unleash. The elevator's hum had been a prelude. This was the symphony. The boardroom was filled with an expectant hush. Sunlight streamed through the panoramic windows, illuminating the polished mahogany table, the anxious faces of the senior executives, the confident anticipation on Jake's face. He'd chosen a seat near the head of the table, a subtle power play. Sarah positioned just slightly behind him, a silent partner in his presumed victory. I took a seat towards the middle, an observer, a catalyst, waiting for the carefully constructed narrative to reach its climax. Dr. Elena Harrison stood at the head of the table, her presence radiating a calm authority. She surveyed the room, a faint smile playing on her lips. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for being here. As you know, Harrison Tech is at a pivotal moment. A moment that calls for bold vision, for innovative leadership, for a new perspective that will guide us into the future. Her gaze swept across the faces at the table, lingering for a fraction of a second on Jake, who visibly puffed up, then moving on. My breath caught in my throat. This was it. After an extensive search and careful consideration, Elena continued, her voice clear and resonant, the board has unanimously approved the acquisition of a company that we believe will revolutionize our approach to content and technology. A company whose founder possesses the unique blend of creative insight and strategic acumen that Harrison Tech so desperately needs. The air was thick with suspense. Jake leaned forward slightly, his eyes fixed on Elena, a hungry glint in them. Sarah's perfectly manicured hand rested on his shoulder. Furthermore, Elena said, her voice ringing with conviction, we have found our next leader. Someone who has not only built an extraordinary company from the ground up, but who embodies the innovative spirit and the deep understanding of narrative that will define our next chapter. She paused, letting the anticipation build to an almost unbearable peak. Then her eyes found mine, a warm, genuine smile spreading across her face. It is my distinct honor and my profound pleasure to announce that Harrison Tech has acquired Narrative AI. And, effective immediately, the new Chief Executive Officer of Harrison Tech will be Miss Maya Chen. The sound of stunned silence that followed was deafening. It was a vacuum, a void, where applause and congratulations should have been. Every eye in the room swiveled towards me. I could feel the weight of their collective shock, their disbelief. Jake's face was a study in slow-motion horror. His confident smile froze, then crumbled. His jaw literally dropped. The color drained from his face, leaving him a sickly ashy gray. He looked as if he'd been physically struck. He stared at me, then at Elena, then back at me, his eyes wide with a dawning, horrified comprehension. Sarah's reaction was faster, more controlled, but no less dramatic. Her smile vanished, replaced by a flicker of pure, unadulterated calculation. Her eyes, cold and sharp, assessed the new power dynamic in an instant. Her hand, which had been resting so confidently on Jake's shoulder, slowly, almost imperceptibly, withdrew. My own emotion-rich moment was a complex tapestry of triumph, yes, but also an unexpected, poignant sadness. Seeing Jake's carefully constructed world shatter before his eyes didn't bring me the pure, uncomplicated joy I might have imagined. There was a hollowness to it, a realization that this victory, as sweet as it was, had come at a cost, not just to him, but to a part of me that had once loved him. I rose from my seat, my movements measured, calm. My quiet power move was in my acceptance speech. I didn't gloat. I didn't make any veiled references to the past. Instead, I spoke of the future, of the exciting possibilities that lay ahead. And then, a single carefully chosen phrase. I believe Harrison Tech's greatest strength lies in its people, in the diverse talents, and indeed, the diverse educational backgrounds they bring. It is this fusion of creativity and technical skill that will drive our success. The subtle emphasis on diverse educational backgrounds was for Jake, a quiet reminder of the worthless degree he had so casually dismissed. As I finished, a hesitant, then more confident round of applause filled the room. Elena beamed. The board members, recovering from their initial shock, were now offering congratulatory smiles. Only Jake remained frozen, a statue of disbelief and dawning despair. When the applause died down, his voice, raspy and barely audible, cut through the lingering silence. Dr. Harrison, Maya, could I request a private meeting? His eyes, when they met mine, were filled with a desperate, bewildered plea. The king had been dethroned, and he didn't even know how the coup had happened. The cliffhanger was no longer mine to bear, it was his. The small, glass-walled conference room adjacent to the main boardroom felt like an interrogation chamber. The city skyline, visible through the pristine window, seemed indifferent to the human drama unfolding within. I stood by that window, my palm resting against the cool, smooth surface, grounding myself as Jake paced the limited space like a caged animal. The scent of his expensive cologne, which had earlier seemed a symbol of his confidence, now felt cloying, almost desperate. He finally stopped, his face a mask of bewildered fury. Manipulation, Maya! That's what this is. 5 years. You've been planning this for 5 years, haven't you? This elaborate revenge scheme. His accusations, sharp and bitter, hung in the air. I turned from the window, my expression calm, my voice even. Revenge, Jake? Is that what you think this is? What else could it be? He shot back, his voice rising. You, CEO of Harrison Tech? My dream company. It's a calculated move to destroy me. I let out a small, weary sigh. My journey, Jake, had very little to do with you, especially in the beginning. It had everything to do with surviving, with proving to myself that I wasn't worthless. The word, his word, hung between us, a stark reminder. Narrative AI was born from my passion, from my belief that understanding stories, understanding human connection, has inherent value. Its success was organic, built on hard work and innovation, not on some long-con revenge plot against an ex-fiancé. His anger seemed to deflate slightly, replaced by a grudging confusion. But why Harrison Tech? Why me? Elena Harrison approached me, Jake. She saw the potential in narrative AI, the vision I had for the future of content. She made me an offer I couldn't refuse. I paused, then added, my voice softer now. The fact that you worked here, and this was your dream company, that was an ironic twist of fate, I'll admit. Perhaps even a motivating factor in the final decision. But it wasn't the genesis of my ambition. He sank into one of the leather chairs, his shoulders slumped, the fight draining out of him. The fury in his eyes was slowly, painfully, crumbling into something that looked an awful lot like regret. He looked smaller somehow, stripped of his usual arrogance. I I had no idea, Maya, about your company, about any of it. No, I said quietly. You didn't. You never really saw me, Jake. Not the real me. You saw what you wanted to see, what fit into your predetermined narrative of who I should be. The silence stretched, thick with unspoken words, with the ghosts of what might have been. Finally, he looked up, his eyes raw with a new, painful understanding. So, what now? You going to fire me? Humiliate me further? This was the moment I could exact true revenge, the kind he was accusing me of. But looking at him then, at his broken pride, his dawning regret, I felt, not pity exactly, but a sense of closure. The anger had dissipated, leaving behind a quiet strength. My quiet power move was not to crush him, but to offer him a choice. That's not my style, Jake. You're a competent VP of strategy. You know this company. You have two options. You can stay, learn to work under my leadership, contribute your skills, and perhaps even discover a new appreciation for diverse educational backgrounds. I met his gaze directly. Or you can leave, quietly, with dignity, find another dream company. The choice is yours. He stared at me, speechless. He'd expected a battle, a final, crushing blow. He hadn't expected grace. I I need to think, he stammered, running a hand through his already disheveled hair. Take your time, I said, but not too much. We have a company to run. I turned to leave, pausing at the door. Oh, and Jake? You might want to talk to Sarah. I imagine she'll have her own strategic calculations to make about this new dynamic. The mini cliffhanger was his to navigate now, his career, his engagement, his entire carefully constructed world, all thrown into sudden, sharp relief by the woman he had once so carelessly discarded. The cold glass of the conference room window felt less like a barrier and more like a lens, showing me just how far I'd come. 6 months later, the executive floor of Harrison Tech was a different landscape. The quiet, almost reverent hush had been replaced by a vibrant, collaborative buzz. My office, once Elena's, was now brighter, more open, filled with books alongside the sleek tech. The scent of expensive cologne was still present in the hallways, but now it mingled with the aroma of fresh coffee from the new artisanal machine I'd had installed in the break room, and sometimes the faint, comforting smell of old paper from the literary journals I still kept piled on my desk. The sound of a thriving office environment, of people excited by their work, was a daily affirmation. Narrative AI wasn't just integrated into Harrison Tech. It was its beating heart. Our platform was revolutionizing everything from script development in their film division to personalized ad campaigns in their marketing wing. Productivity was up, creativity was flourishing, and the stock price was steadily climbing. Even the most skeptical old guard executives were starting to come around, their initial resistance replaced by a grudging admiration, then genuine enthusiasm. Jake chose to stay. It surprised me, and I think it surprised him even more. The first few weeks had been awkward, tense. He'd avoided eye contact, his contributions in meetings clipped and formal. But slowly, something shifted. He saw the changes I was implementing, the positive impact narrative AI was having. He saw the respect I commanded, not through fear, but through competence and a clear, unwavering vision. He started asking questions, genuine questions about the AI, about my approach to leadership. He began to see the value in what I brought, a value he had once been so blind to. He was still ambitious, still driven, but a new humility had tempered his arrogance. He was learning to respect my leadership, and in doing so, perhaps learning to respect the Maya he'd never truly known. We weren't friends, not by any stretch of the imagination, but we'd found a way to be colleagues, effective ones. Sarah, predictably, had not stayed. Within a month of my appointment, she had quietly transferred to a rival company overseas. Her carefully constructed power play had crumbled, and she, ever the strategist, had cut her losses and moved on. The engagement, I heard through the grapevine, was off. Jake never mentioned it, and I never asked. Some narratives are best left unexplored. One quiet evening, as I was packing up to leave, I paused by my office window, looking out at the glittering cityscape. The pain of 5 years ago, once a raw, gaping wound, had faded into a scar, a reminder of a battle fought and won. but more than one transformed. It hadn't just been about revenge or even justice. It had been about alchemy, about transmuting pain into purpose, rejection into resilience. The quiet power move, the final one, was this internal realization. The true worth of any education, any experience, isn't inherent in the thing itself, but in what you build with it. My worthless literature degree had been the foundation upon which I'd built an empire, not of words, but of innovation. The final scene of this chapter of my life wasn't one of gloating triumph over a fallen foe. It was something quieter, more meaningful. A few weeks later, Chloe, my assistant, introduced me to a new intern, a bright-eyed young woman named Emily, fresh out of college with a literature degree and a head full of dreams, worried about her prospects in a tech-dominated world. I invited Emily into my office, gesturing for her to sit. "Chloe tells me you're a fellow literature enthusiast," I said, smiling. Her eyes widened slightly. You? You studied literature, Miss Chen?" "I did," I confirmed. "And let me tell you, Emily, never let anyone tell you that a deep understanding of story, of human nature, of the power of words is anything less than a superpower in any field, especially in a world that's starving for genuine connection." As I began to talk to her, to see the spark of passion in her eyes ignite with hope, I realized this was the true resolution. Not just to be CEO, not just to have proven Jake wrong, but to be in a position to lift others, to show them that unconventional paths can lead to extraordinary destinations. My journey hadn't just been for me, it could now inspire others. And that, I realized, was the most valuable story of all, the story of turning worthless into priceless.